Hello, everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jabari, and this is a total spontaneous reaction. I want to say spontaneous because I actually had to take my time in getting my thoughts together of what transpired yesterday. Um, and if I would have known that Putin's interview was going to be 2 hours long, I would have pushed back my interview with Huvru O'Malley um, to like 8 o'clock or something. I didn't know that it was going to be 2 hours long, and I felt a little bit like, dang it. But I'm glad that I heard a lot of good feedback from people that watched it. Shouts out to the Huvru movement. Free Huvru 3, first of all. Let's just get that straight. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the Tucker Carlson interview, of course, and then I'm also going to get into this report I found on Joe Biden's mental state, which is absolutely bonkers to me. Dude, like all this stuff that had went down in one day made me forget that Usher's new album's out. Like, I'm like, oh shoot, Usher's new album out. Anyway, so let's talk about. I want to play some clips too. I have went to the website on Tucker Carlson, and Notice that he had timestamps, which is actually in alignment with what I want to get into. First, I have criticisms for both sides with this interview. And I'm not a fan of Tucker Carlson. As you can tell, my politics are totally different from Tucker Carlson. So it's very, very interesting. You know, I did not expect a Tucker Carlson, a former Fox News. This dude was, regardless of how I think about him, politically, I mean, and his background and all this stuff, at the end of the day, he was the most watched in this generation, and Fox News is definitely taking a hit because of this. So that's just how it is. they wanna play games. They lose their big guy, and I don't know why they did that. I really don't know why they did that, but he's gone. I don't look into Fox News to even care enough to figure out why they fired him. I heard that it was about a big lawsuit or something like that. But at the end of the day, they lost their biggest talent. And now here he is, independent. And I made a quote. I made a before the interview started, I made a post on Facebook giving a salute out to Mike Wallace. People should look at what Mike Wallace did, or what Barbara Walters did. A lot of journalists used to get these tough conversations. When it was time to go talk to Fidel Castro, Barbara Walters went to go talk to Fidel Castro. When it was time to go talk to Bin Laden, people went to go talk to Bin Laden. Mike Wallace literally spoke to a KKK member. That's insane. And he had a lot of other stories that in today's journalism will not at all be touched, because it goes against the narrative. Back in the day, you had over 50 companies that control the media. Now you have only 5 companies that control the media. And you're seeing the narrative is being very stronghold by these oligarchs, very stronghold by these paid off politicians. And it's hard to dispute or just even have a nuance. Now, with that, I have to say off the back, I'm disappointed in Tucker Carlson's choices of questions, because that goes off as just being a red state guy. He also assumed that China fears that China fears America, and America doesn't fear China. It's literally the other way around. I mean, 24/7 in our media, we're always talking about China, and you're hearing the politicians 24/7 talk junk about China. So Putin was right to correct them on that. Putin was also correct talking about the NATO, which is very important, which I'm going to go into, talking about the NATO situation. The whole history, I'm not Russian, I'm not Ukrainian. I disagree with this whole fact of the idea that he feels that he has a right to Ukrainian land. I don't think that's what he was really trying to get across. I think he was really trying to get across that Russia started in Kiev. Russia has a strong bond in history. Knowing Russians and knowing Ukrainians that I have spoken to, I had a Ukrainian guy that was on Kiev side on my podcast. I've had a lot of Ukrainian friends and Russian friends that I've come to meet over throughout the years of my life, and even at work, and I've heard mad different sides throughout the years. What I understand about Ukraine is that there is a huge ethnic Russian population there, and the civil war is off of that, a very Russophobic government. People forget that there was these people that the Kiev regime like to regime as like the great, I like to say they are the great founding fathers of Ukraine. These guys were Nazis. Stefan Bandera, if you look him up, he was a Nazi. And that's just on the Kiev side, not the Donbass and all around those regions, which is where you see a lot of ethnic Russians at. So this civil war started. Yes, he was right. He said it started earlier than that, but yes, They went after the Donbass in 2014 after they overthrew a democratically elected Yanukovych and put in a who they called the chocolate factory man, Petro Poroshenko. Putin's right on that too. I don't like how Putin addressed the border. I think Putin had a great opportunity here to try to get Americans to understand that there is a Nazi influence and all this stuff. And I feel like he failed on trying to show what is actually going on and was just too like obsessed with just talking about history, which there's a time and a place, and he has already done that. And there's our consistencies with that because you notice he's just inconsistencies with that because he's blaming the USSR for this, which is I totally agree. I don't agree with that. I totally disagree with him blaming the USSR for these borders. Totally disagree on that. He's bashing hard on the USSR, which is why I think it's hilarious that Americans think he's a communist. This man's like one of the richest people in the freaking world. And he literally said that he has a market system, a capitalist system. He's an Orthodox Christian. He has like a Republican ideal when you look at his politics. There's a reason why him and Bush was like pretty close when Bush was president. So I think Putin could have brought this in a totally different way in this interview instead of going on about the history, because a lot of Americans are not going to care much about the history. You should be talking about it took you an hour to get into the interview to talk about NATO. And you should be talking about how the promise, all that stuff. You promised the U.S. was going to expand, and they did. I love how you also talked about how he tried to negotiate. And Boris Johnson literally tells Zelensky no. Then later on, Zelensky puts a decree in his country that there will be no negotiations with Russia. So I like that he brought that out, but I feel like this was a time for him to show that, he's a Christian, because that will catch the American audience, and that the reason why he wants this war, the reason why he invaded was because the U.S. used this Kiev regime to pressure him to invade, with saying that we're going to put them in NATO and the civil war that they're funding that killed over 14,000 ethnic Russian Ukrainians, which here in America, if you don't really study into what's going on in Ukraine, you don't know about that. And you automatically disregard that because the media here tells them that they're Russian separatists. They don't even acknowledge their humanity in the Donbass regions and Lugansk regions. They call them separatists. That's absolutely wrong. That's degrading. It's just like how Israel classifies all Palestinians as terrorists. And you see them on the UN speeches and wherever the hell they get a platform at, and they say even the kids are guilty too. And I wish he went in on the ICC, how the ICC is so biased to charge him with baseless claims that he's kidnapping children just because children are being removed from a battlefield. And you see the stats of how many kids in the Ukraine war so far has been murdered compared to the 11,000 children in Palestine that are murdered right now. You can see a difference. What I like about this, that hopefully people in America that watch this get to see a perspective that was hidden. Remember, they called the Maidan coup a Maidan revolution, even when Ukrainians were complaining about that. I had a co-worker. I'm not going to tell you what job it was because I have worked multiple jobs, but I was working at a call center, and she was a refugee from Ukraine. And she told me the reason why she left her country. You know the reason why she left her country? She left her country because of the coup. What they call here the revolution. She told me that she left her country because of the coup. Why? Because she's ethnic Russian Ukrainian. And why did she leave? Because a civil war started. A civil war that claimed 14,000 lives of ethnic Russian people. but they just want to talk about Crimea. They want to talk about how there's a referendum that happened in Lugansk and Lugansk. They don't talk about why these citizens of Crimea and Lugansk, and Crimea is adjacent from that. But why did they leave? Why did they leave and go back to Russia? There's a lot, but let's go back to the NATO part, because I think he did a great job here, and you can see it in his mind. Not his mind, his mannerisms and his frustration. He's really fucking sick and tired of trying to explain this. And these are things that I never even like. I don't watch Vladimir Putin speeches like that. Only once in a while. The last time I watched a Vladimir Putin speech was when he invaded Ukraine. And before that is when I was watching Ukraine on Fire, which was a great documentary made by Roger Stone, which talked about the coup and all the innocent people that was killed and how they overthrew a democratically elected president that was neutral, because Ukraine's stance was neutral. But the EU, the NATO, the United States government, they did not want Ukraine to be neutral. The CIA does not want Ukraine to be neutral. Why? Because they want to expand NATO and they want to crush Russia. This is proof. We see this in the Cold War. All this evidence is you don't have to not dispute this if you don't know. But if you dispute it and you do know, it's kind of weird. But anyway, let's go to the video. There's so much I want to get into. So let's see. This is him talking about NATO.
The second point is a very important one. I want you, as an American citizen, and your viewers to hear about this as well. The former Russian leadership assumed that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist, and therefore there were no longer any ideological dividing lines. Russia even agreed voluntarily and proactively to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and believed that this would be understood by the so-called civilized West as an invitation for cooperation and association. That is what Russia was expecting, both from the United States and the so-called collective West as a whole. There were smart people, including in Germany, Egon Bahr, a major politician of the Social Democratic Party, who insisted in his personal conversations with the Soviet leadership on the brink of the collapse of the Soviet Union that a new security system should be established in Europe. Help should be given to unify Germany, but a new system should be also established to include the United States, Canada, Russia, and other Central European countries.
Yes.
But NATO needs not to expand. That's what he said. If NATO expands, everything would be just the same as during the Cold War, only closer to Russia's borders.
And that's why I'm going to play a little bit more of this, but that's why it's a security conflict to them. Because I'm 32. I'm 32 years old. I was not alive during the Cold War. But everybody that was alive during the Cold War will tell you it was a crazy ass time. Everybody. People thought that they were just going to get blown out smithereens any second now. You think Russians want that type of tension? What caused that? It's NATO. Building NATO. Using NATO as a force against Russia. That whole Cold War thing, after they defeated the Nazis, they lost 27 million people. We don't even bring up the victims of Russia when we talk about how destructive Nazism was. We don't bring up the victims. 2 million Jews who were Russian died in the Holocaust out of that 6 million. And then they're recovering. They're recovering from that. And now they have to worry about if the United States wants to overthrow them. Cold War starts. The United States puts nuclear weapons in Turkey. The USSR responsible for putting nuclear weapons in Cuba. That was a very tensional time. How stressful you think you are? You're the leader of Russia and you seeing some shit like that. And you're not even a communist country. Well, communism has not even started yet. Communism is still a theory. These are all socialist governments that we were talking about of the past and of the president today here in China. So you're a capitalist country now. You lost over 100,000 people when you had to switch over, because when they collapsed, it was really, really bad. They had to change their system. And when they changed their system to a capitalist system, that means a lot of people lost what they used and needed to survive: healthcare, housing, all these type of calamities happened, and over 100,000 people died in Russia because of it. And now you're still giving them the same smoke after the CIA, all those entities work together to make Soviet Union collapse. You got it, Reagan. You got it. But here we are today, Democratic and Republican Party still want to pressure, and it's the Democrats mostly right now. They still want to pressure Russia. Do you see why? And I'm against invasions, but do you see why this Republican thinking politician, Vladimir Putin, was like, okay, I'm going to invade Russia, Ukraine? Add that on with the ethnic Russians who are being murdered by a Nazi-influenced regime back in 2014 for 8 years straight. Add on with Zelensky running on a peace, which he talks about. He ran for peace, but flipped the script because he realized he can't screw the U.S., so he did what the U.S. wanted. And the U.S. goes with whoever is against Russia in this situation. So, yes, those neo-Nazis in Ukraine. We saw many before Russia invaded Ukraine. I used to see from 2014 all the way up for 8 years straight, mad publications, mad investigations into the Nazi problem in Ukraine. Hell, even freaking Hate Thy Neighbor on Vice had an episode about Ukrainian Nazis. So this whole trying to say that there's no Nazis in Ukraine is just, it's like hogwash at this point. It's like you just don't know. And we're not calling Ukraine a Nazi government. There's a difference because, like I said, I'm going off of my perspective, and my perspective is not only off of what I've read, but also who I spoke to. And Ukraine is not a Nazi country. It's a very small percentage, but the influence and who was put in power is Nazi influence, and that's off the behest of the American tax dollars. Wait, let me play a little bit more of this.
That's all. He was a wise old man, but no one listened to him. In fact, he got angry once. If, he said, you don't listen to me, I'm never setting my foot in Moscow once again. Everything happened just as he had said.
Well, of course, it did come true. And you've mentioned this many times. I think it's a fair point. And many in America thought that relations between Russia and the United States would be fine with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, that the opposite happened. But you've never explained why you think that happened, except to say that the West fears a strong Russia.
And I just explained that, and he explains it right there too. I want to get into real quick what conversation he had with Clinton on this as well. And this is also something that we talk about as well, all over in the progressive circles. Everyone that knows about Ukraine, everyone that knows about what's going on in Russia, really. Let's just go right to it.
In 2000, I thought, okay, the Yugoslav issue is over, but we should try to restore relations. Let's reopen the door that Russia had tried to go through. And moreover, I said it publicly, I can reiterate. At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you
It's
sincere?
impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer
Yes.
I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was,
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
And this is when I talk about Tucker Carlson asking stupid questions. I mean, throughout this whole thing, you got to see that he's just kept owning them because he's just like, "Wow, dude, like, are you effing serious? Like, are you serious? If I ask the man, can we join NATO? If I ask the man, can we join NATO? What does that mean? That means he's interested in joining NATO. But the whole purpose of NATO, which is what he's learning now, was to make sure Russia never rises again. So no matter if you are a capitalist government now, this is what Putin has learned. They're a capitalist government now. They are still the enemy because we got a whole lot of Cold War people that still hold a grudge to this day that still have some form of power. I'm gonna blame the old rich farts that is polluting this system right now and everybody that follows them, which is almost every liberal at this point. Like, I'm not going to get on the liberals so hard today, but like, this is a very important clip because a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that him and George Bush had a very strong relationship. So this is the part that I wish was more in detail when I was talking about, instead of talking wasting almost an hour talking about, the history of how the Orthodox Russian church started in Kiev and going back to the 800s and stuff, instead of talking about all that randomness, because it's not relevant to what the interview is about. But this is the way he feels that he has to describe why he's doing what he's doing, which, look, everybody has a way to rationalize things. And this is the way Putin decides to rationalize things. He wanted to give a whole spiel on the history. But if he had more time to talk about this issue right here with NATO and his relationships that have been tarnished around this will be a little bit more understanding for Americans, I feel. Now I want to talk about the last thing before I go into Biden. The Nord Stream pipeline, which I have covered on here as well too. And I think it's very, very important to talk about that. We don't need to talk about the treaty. Everybody knows the UK told Zelensky no. Zelensky made a decree later on too, saying, "Oh, it's against the law now to negotiate with Russia." So we don't need to talk about that. People that know and well aware should know that. And I'm repeating it now because if you don't know, now you know. Now this is the pipeline talk.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have? I did not blow up Nord Stream. Thank you, though.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities. Because there may be many people interested, but not all of them are capable of sinking to the bottom of the Baltic Sea and carrying out this explosion. These two components should be connected. Who is interested and who is capable of doing it?
But I'm confused. I mean, that's the biggest act of industrial terrorism ever, and it's the largest emission of CO2 in history. Okay, so if you had evidence, and presumably given your security services, your intel services, you would, that NATO, the US, CIA, the West did this, why wouldn't you present?
And again, with the dumb questions. This is what I'm talking about, man. Like, Tucker astounds me. Maybe he's being sarcastic right here, so I'm just not gonna, maybe he's being sarcastic. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But it's like, even to suggest that, dude, anything that this government puts out, the West automatically tells you it's a lie. And then it gets to the point, not even that they tell you it's a lie, by second nature, because of how much this country has shat on the West. How much this country has shot on Russia, especially with the whole Red Scare, McCarthyism nonsense. People just not going to believe it. So at the end of the day, like what Putin says, U.S. propaganda is very hard to defeat. You need hardcore evidence. And when you get that, you get put in prison. That's what happens to Julian Assange. That's what happened to Chelsea Manning. As soon as you get the hardcore evidence, you get put in prison. They could get a man from Australia that has never even been in America, that has no type of citizenship at all for the United States. He's Australian. They could grab him, say he's treasonous, which is crazy because he's not American, just because he showed proof of war crimes and exposed the Iraq war. Yeah. What can you do when automatically you will be seen as discredited? And now our media now is talking about the pipeline. Before they said, oh, it was the Russians. And then they said, no, it was the Ukrainians. They did a little small boat thing. Then they blamed the guy that's currently in prison in Ukraine. So how the hell did he do it? It's CIA, bro. The CIA is all over this. Like it's clear as day. And shouts out to Herschel, by the way. Shouts out to Herschel for bringing that up. I wish that this interview was better on both sides. They could have been more prepared instead of these weak ass questions from Tucker Carlson and this whole nonsense of elaborate talking from the beginning. Get down to the business, man. Down to the business. Now let's get into Biden. This guy. Oh, God. So from my understanding, there was documents that Joe Biden was not allowed to grab. And this is a common thing that happens with both parties. Both parties does this. I'm gonna put it up so you guys can see it. And well, let me talk real quick before we go into that article. This is an article from the CBC. Basically, Joe Biden, the reason why he's not being prosecuted for this, Donald Trump is being prosecuted for what he did. But the reason why the whole Mar-a-Lago thing, for people to remember, and they were like, oh, you stole documents from the White House and stuff like that. Same week when they raided Chairman Omar as well, too, by the way, in Florida. So here's the thing. They are now reporting about Biden's mental state. That's a defense to not charge him. You're exposing that this man has mental issues and he's deteriorating. Here it says his memory appeared to have significant limitations. It also said that these lapses are evidence not only in the interview with the investigators last year, but also in the record of 2017 interviews Biden gave to his book ghostwriter. The report says Biden struggled to remember what years he was vice president. Jesus Christ. This is our commander in chief. This is the guy they propped up. He won because they propped him up. They screwed Bernie Sanders a second time, and they did a FU to everybody else that tried to run against him. This is the guy that they chose to be the commander in chief. This is the man that holds the nuke codes. This is the man that's going around bombing the Middle East instead of being a statesman and understanding what is Yemen's demands. It's no, he calls them all Iran back. If you are against Israel, you are Iran back. It's crazy. It's crazy. The fact that, how dare you even think that killing Palestinians is wrong? What is wrong with y'all? What's wrong with this? This is him. This is him. This is who they're talking about. All right. The report says Biden struggled to remember what years he was vice president. If it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president? Question mark. It quotes him saying during an interview last fall, he left the vice presidency 2017. The report also says he did not remember even within several years when his son died, which was in 2015. It also says his memory appears hazy when discussing a debate about troop levels in Afghanistan during the Obama administration. The debate was once important to Biden, says the document, yet he struggled to remember basic details, describing one general he agreed with as someone he disagreed with. So basically, this report is saying, oh, I just realized I'm reading it and no one's seeing it. Here, you can see it. I'm gonna talk over it. So basically, what this report is saying, this is from CBC, that he's too incompetent to be prosecuted because he's not going to remember what the hell he did wrong. That's what is the defense. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because this is the United States president. This is the president of the United. This is the commander in chief. This is the man that holds the new codes. This is like a big deal. This is the guy that's running the country, man. This is who they chose to run against Trump. They screwed everybody else, and they chose him, the dude that has all these neurological issues, to run against Trump. Because he's easier to control. I'm just going to say it. Why do you think they didn't let Feinstein step down? The woman couldn't even speak before she died. They kept her there until she was carried into a coffin. Same thing's going to happen with Mitch McConnell. Nancy Pelosi is going to come back. And, you know, when it comes to Nancy Pelosi, as crazy and evil she is very competent. So I'm not against this whole, it's the age gap. No, if you are 80 years old, 90 years old, and you still show that you have some type of like understanding and what's going on, you should run. Go ahead. But if you are deteriorating and they're holding you, no. This is what they're doing to Biden. This is what I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing because we're fucking screwed. That's what I'm laughing about. I'm laughing at the fact that we're fucking screwed. Like, we're screwed. That's what I'm laughing about. This is our commander in chief. This is the guy that cannot like be rational. Like, I understand that people are going to make this argument, and it's an old argument that's really getting lame. But if not him, then who? Trump? You want Trump again? Let me tell you something. I'm tell you something right now, and I think I'm gonna end this video just off of this. By the way, thank you all for listening, and don't forget to like, share, and follow. I also have a Cash App now. So people have asked, where can you donate? Let me put the Cash App up. Cash App VOC Jabari. You know what I mean? Yes. Cash App VOC Jabari. I gotta say this. When it comes to Trump and this fear mongering around Trump, and as if the country was great or amazing, or it was the star of democracy when you live in a republic and you're in a dictatorship full of oligarchs. When you want to talk about dictatorships, you're in a dictatorship of oligarchs here. The oligarchs run the country. You know how I know the oligarchs run the country? Because when Biden is getting all toothy and Nelly talking about how we're going to go after China and Russia is this and Israel is great and Palestine, I feel bad for the Palestinians, but bomb them. While he's doing all that, the oligarchs are still getting money from China. Xi Jinping didn't go to the White House. He went to San Francisco. He went to go speak to Elon Musk. He went to go speak to Silicon Valley. That's where he went. While the politicians are sitting here trying to get us in the war, the oligarchs are like, while this is going on, how we going to sustain the bag? It's all about the bag to them. So we're in a republic. We're in a capitalist, late stage capitalist system, a republic, a dictatorship of oligarchs. They control the politicians. And if the politicians go against their donors, oh God, no, don't do that. That's where we're at today, people. So before we start pointing our fingers at any other country, just remember you got 900 bases around the world surrounding countries that are our enemy, intimidating them. You got Pakistan elections being funded by us. The military is being authoritarian as hell with that election, so they don't get another Imran Khan, who is now facing 10 years off of proving that the U.S. had him kicked out of his seat, and also another 7 years because apparently he wasn't legally married by Pakistani law, whatever. You got the dictator Dina, her regime up in Peru being funded by the United States. You got Israel being funded by the United States as they continue the genocide. Two indigenous struggles right there. Peru, Israel killing the Palestinians, the new regime killing the indigenous people in Peru. All that funded by the U.S. government. And nobody knows what the hell the CIA is doing right now. So you got all that going on. And then you got the news captured by the Pentagon. And that's very freaking deadly. And that's why they got on Tucker Carlson, because Tucker Carlson is not captured by the Pentagon no more. He's not working for Fox News or anything. So he's going to go talk to Putin. This wasn't a problem back in the day. American journalists have always interviewed Putin. American journalists have always had the right of way to interview anybody who they wanted to back in the day. Not a thing no more. Not think no more. And then the other, one more thing. Tucker Carlson talk about he was in power for 22 years. That dude bounced around in Russia with seats. He was a prime minister once. Like, he wasn't just the president the whole time, bro. Like, that's nothing. Like, dude, know your history before you go and talk to the man. I know that people think that Russia is still a communist country, and you saw the Family Guy video. Like, I get it, but do the due diligence to see that as like something to prove. Find evidence that is true, and if you realize it's not, then realize that you're wrong, and then find the real evidence. That's it. That's all I ask for. When these American journalists just go and talk to somebody like Putin, like, just be more prepared, man. Be more freaking prepared. See, if I was to interview Putin, I will first want him to talk about NATO, because that's the whole reason why he's in Ukraine in the first place. And then I will first want him to talk about China and his relationship with China, which is very important, so the Americans can understand that part. And then I want him to talk about being what it's like, the culture, Orthodox Russian Christianity. Talk about your culture, bro. There's a lot of Christians here. They can relate to that. There's a lot of ways we could have brought in and shown a different perspective with this interview. I'm not going to say we, because God knows I don't want to associate myself with Tucker Carlson. But anyway, don't forget to like, share, and follow. And thank you all so much for listening to Lil Me. Please donate. Cash App right there. Jabari. Cash App. And check out the last 2 episodes. I got Don't Stop Talking About Palestine panel dropping on the 12th. It took a while to make sure that video is mastered to the best way of my ability, because I want to make sure the sound was crisp, and I want to thank the Bizza also for challenging me as well too, to make sure that sound is crisp. Learned a lot of new things because of that. Music interview coming up as well. We're still covering musicians, so keep a lookout for that. And without further ado, my name is Jabari, and everybody have a really good day.